Good evening and welcome to Old Dominion Realty's live webinar. We're excited to have you back again this evening, and tonight we are going to be discussing commercial real estate. I've got John Bowman from our South Main Street office with us this evening. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thanks for having me, Renee.
And he's going to talk to us a little bit later about the ins and outs of purchasing and selling real estate in the commercial realm. And we've got Jonah Pence from Farmers and Merchants Bank with us here this evening as well. Thanks for joining us, Jonah.
Thanks for having me.
Jonah works out of the Crossroads office of Farmers and Merchants Bank right across the street from me, and it's good to know where to send folks to when they come in with questions about financing some commercial real estate and that sort of stuff. If you have any questions about the webinars that we've been doing recently, we've been, I guess, maybe the past 8 months or so, bringing you guys live webinars. We do save these, and you can go back and reference all the webinars that we've done, from first-time home buyer to selling your home, getting your house ready to sell, to buying investment property and property management, all the way up to today's webinar with commercial real estate. Where you go to find that is the Old Dominion Realty website, which is www.odrva.com, and you'll click at the top at the webinars tab, and then you'll just come up with a nice list there of webinars that we've done in the past. So hope that you use that reference whenever you need to, and also this evening, as well as any other time coming up the next week or so, if you have questions that you'd like to email into our panelists, you can email those to mail@odrva.com, and somebody here will get back with you with a good answer. So we're going to take a quick break, and Pam Estes is going to be back with these fine gentlemen to talk to you guys about how to buy and sell real estate and how to finance it in that commercial realm. So we'll see you back here in a few moments.
Something new from Old Dominion. Our clients have loved our feature-rich mobile site for years, and now you can get all that info in an app. Search the way you like. Discover listings in new ways. From desktop to mobile, we've got you covered. And one more thing, we are the only company in the area to have access to 5 MLS systems. That means you'll get more listings and info here than anywhere else. Guaranteed. Old Dominion Realty. Now that's what you were looking for.
Hi, welcome back again. My name is Pam Estes with Old Dominion Realty, and I thank you so much for attending our webinar this evening regarding commercial real estate. Again, as Renee mentioned, we're with John Bowman with Old Dominion Realty.
Good evening.
Welcome, John.
Thank you,
and
Pam.
welcome, Jonah Pence with Farmers and Merchants Bank.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate that. And commercially, John stays busy. My office is close to John's at South Main. And I see John coming and going and talking about commercial real estate all day long. So I think we've got our true expert here this evening with us. Absolutely. So John, when we have buyers and sellers looking into selling their commercial building, or purchasers looking to purchase their strip mall or their multifamily project, what are some of the things that they begin to look for?
The first thing that investor is going to look for is, what is the return on his investment? If he has $100,000 and he's going to put it in a savings account at the bank, he'd be lucky to get 1% today, don't you think, Jonah?
That's right.
So if he's going to be looking at where he might put that money, he wants to know what kind of a return he's going to get on it. So if he's taking $100,000, let's say, to invest, let's take a look at what it might take to make a good return. So if he has $100,000 he's looking to invest, and that property has a $700 a month return on it, that's $8,400 a year in a gross income. And if we just took that gross income and divided it by that purchase price, that puts an 8.4% return. That's a pretty stellar return on your money today in today's market.
I understand. And I hear, John, many times we hear gross operating income, we talk about return on investment, but I hear you throughout the day talk about a cap rate. Can you explain to the public what you mean by a cap rate?
We're going to work backwards from that scenario we just talked about.
Okay.
So if I'm looking to apply a cap rate to a property, I'm going to take that $8,400, that operating income, and I'm going to say, okay, if I want an 8% return on that money, okay, annually, I'm going to divide it by 0.08, and it's going to give me the price of a piece of property that I might be looking to spend. So if I take $8,400 divided by 0.08, It says I'm looking for a $105,000 piece of property.
Yes.
If I want an 8% return on that amount of money.
Yes. I know Renee and I have talked about in the past that with residential real estate, we talk about hardwood floors, we talk about granite countertops, but in commercial real estate, John, is different. What are some of those marketable items that you look for in commercial?
Well, there are lots of issues that affect marketability, and that could be competing uses or also compatible uses. So if we're looking at a strip center, for example, and it already has one restaurant in it, do we really need two restaurants in there, or will they be competing against each other for the market share that's there? So we're going to look at those compatible uses in a strip center. We're also going to look at the age of the building. Is it obsolete? The size of it? Is it the space that most people need, or is it too small or too large? We're also going to look at what kind of build-out needs it has. Does it need a major retrofit in order to meet today's market trends? And then there's also things like lighting and signage that can affect marketability. The last commercial lease that I was a part of, one of the requirements of that lease was to add additional lighting in the parking lot and along the top of the building, not only for safety for the tenant themselves, but also for their clientele.
Yes.
And signage is also important.
Talk about signage, John. Is it true that your buyer, your seller needs to be concerned about zoning issues with regard to signage? Could that be an issue?
It can be, and so that's actually one of the things that keeps some of the older buildings today more competitive. The older buildings have signs that were grandfathered a long time ago. So sometimes they are larger than what would be permitted today. Sometimes they're taller than what would be permitted today. And so that visibility that you can get with an older building sometimes is what an investor's looking for. At least that tenant may be looking for that increased visibility, and they may compromise on an older structure because of that visibility. So today's zoning codes are much tighter, and signage is definitely an issue.
It's interesting. You mentioned to me that if you were a restaurant owner, you might want to be concerned about having another restaurant right beside you. But then I know in Harrisonburg, we talk about Restaurant Row, and we talk about the car dealers all in a row. So in some cases, I guess it can be an advantage as well.
There are positives and negatives to both pieces. And so you want to look at compatible uses, or are they competing uses? An example, car lots. No, they want to all be in the same place, because if I'm looking for a vehicle, I'm going to drive up and down the street and I'll look at everything that's there.
Yes, makes sense. So I know John's talked about you have your gross income, you have your net income, and that brings us to our financing, Jonah. Help us out when it comes to financing, different from residential real estate that Renee and I have talked in the past. How is commercial lending a little bit different?
Yeah, commercial's quite different than residential. Obviously, you have different types of commercial properties, and we'll kind of stay on the theme of shopping center or strip center where you have multiple tenants. With residential, you're basically looking at the bar income. With a shopping center, obviously, you got to look at multiple sources of revenue and also multiple sources of expenses. You might have a bar and a guarantor. You're looking at financing from both parties in that case.
Yes. How about lease agreements? Could you touch on that for us a little bit this evening?
Absolutely. That's one thing that, as John mentioned too, that when you purchase, you want to recognize what leases are good and what ones might be maybe a little more short term as far as the tenants and how they have those structured. When we look at a lease agreement, prefer to have it 5-year, and we want to see the history. Obviously, if you got somebody that's not been there a long time, you might have to allow a little more for vacancy possibilities. But lease agreements as well as rent rolls play a huge factor in determining who gets qualified or not.
Yes, and I guess, John, when you go to evaluate a piece of commercial property, gathering those documents in order to arrive at your value is very helpful or needed.
That's correct. We're gonna evaluate that lease. We're gonna take a look at it, just as Jonah said. We want to look at the stability that's there and the length of term, and also whether we feel like it's at market rate.
Wonderful. Jonah, you've talked about buyouts, or we've heard that term, build-outs, excuse me, not buyouts, but build-outs. Could you explain to the public what you mean from a banker's point of view about a build-out?
Sure. If you have, whether it's a new tenant coming in and they have a different need as far as how they need to have their unit structured, whether it needs to have a wall, for example. One thing you want to look at is the cost, obviously. Is there a reimbursement there to the landlord? But from a financing perspective, you want to keep in mind if that tenant does leave, how's that going to affect the next tenant coming in? And is that going to be attractive maybe to a tenant coming in, or is it going to take away from that unit?
And I guess, John, when you are working with, let's say, for example, your commercial purchaser for a restaurant, whether the building he's looking at is set up for the restaurant now, needs changes, or is just a vacant box.
That's right. We're going to take a look at that, and we may pay more for the property if that current tenant, current landlord or owner is going to do the build out necessary. Or we would maybe pay less for the building if that build out need is going to be solely on the responsibility of the purchaser or that tenant.
Yes. So Jonah, when you evaluate these items for the needs, then you come to an estimated net cash flow. Can you explain that for us?
Absolutely. Obviously, cash flow is the first thing that we're going to be looking at. Obviously, we got some underwriting that we have to do first. Appraisal is always another topic. But estimating cash flow, is if we keep that same example with a strip center or a shopping mall where you have multiple tenants, the first thing we're going to look at is the potential gross income. This could be, whether it's a new facility, it might be market leases, market rents, what are they going for? So it could be that you have to estimate, it could be that you have a long-standing unit where you have multiple tenants that have provided rent rolls that are easy to use. Once you take that possible gross income, you're going to look at tenant reimbursements. This could be the build out that we talked about, whether they're reimbursing the landlord for some of those fees. And then the vacancy. This can be a little bit vague depending on the unit. I mean, it really depends what percentage we're going to use if there's not a consistent vacancy rate. John, what are you kind of seeing out there as an average maybe?
I think in general we're probably applying 4 to 5% vacancy rates on most properties.
Great.
But it is property specific, as you know.
Right, exactly. The other thing is you're going to add back miscellaneous income. This could be anything other than the rent. This could be fees or anything like that. This will get your effective gross income. And then you're going to take out the operating expenses. And this is where we take out
taxes and insurance,
exactly,
utilities,
CAMs, common area maintenance fees, and as you mentioned, any repair, anything like that, and taxes and insurance. This sets you up with your nominal net operating income, and then you're going to subtract out any capital expenditures. This could be a new roof. This is something that we might foresee in the future that we got to be aware of that's going to really affect the net cash flow at the end. This kind of gives you your true income. What we're looking for is what we call economic net operating income, and this is what services the debt, obviously.
Understand. I know Jonah touched on common area maintenance. Could you speak a little bit, John, on when you go to look at a particular piece of commercial property, what are some of the common area maintenance that could pop up?
Well, if we're sticking with the same example of that strip center, we're going to look about snow removal. It might be mowing common areas. Okay, anything that all tenants that are a part of that strip center would have benefit to or would have access to. Everyone's going to pay a portion every month to maintain those common areas. It may be a parking lot, it may be a flower bed, it might just, but whatever is common to the building.
Yes. Jonah, you mentioned appraisers. I know that Renee and I have talked in the past about residential appraisers, and they're quite detailed reports. I would assume a commercial appraisal is even more detailed.
Absolutely. It can be very complicated depending on the property, particularly if you have multiple tenants, as we're mentioning here today. Loan to value is something that we look at when we lend, and on a commercial loan, typically you want 20-25% equity or cash down payment into the transaction. Loan to value is basically the acquisition cost or the appraisal, whichever is lower, and we're working off that figure to get our loan to value.
Okay, that brings us to our next slide. And again, just kind of a brief summary, Jonah, of some of the items that go into estimating that cash flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that I don't believe we mentioned was management fees. That certainly can pop up, and I think sometimes that's overlooked at times. Depending on who's doing that maintenance, whether it is the landlord or if they hire out a maintenance, that's certainly something that we need to consider, and obviously a buyer needs to consider
as well. Great. So that brings us to our estimating net cash flow, and there's on our slide it talks about the positives and the negatives that help to arrive at that. Could you go through that with us, Jonah?
Certainly. That's obviously we're looking at the bar, what they've done in the past. We're looking at the guarantors, but the main thing is how's that unit cash flowing, and we kind of went over how we come up with our net figures. If we can cover that rent and we feel pretty good about it, then there's a good chance we're going to get that loan approved.
Very good, very good. Interest rates. Let's talk about our local market. Commercial interest rates, what do they look like now?
Rates are still great. We keep thinking they're going to go up, but I tell you, the last 5 years, they have been low.
Tremendously. It's just wonderful.
And I've warned my customers that they're going to go up, but they're still low. Depending on the property, the qualification of the borrower, they're 4.5, 5.5, depending how that adjustment comes out. But certainly a great time to borrow.
Very good. And how about you, John? What are you seeing locally in our commercial market in the last year, 2014?
Well, for the first time in 7 or 8 years, some of my commercial investors are finally fully leased. So we're actually seeing buildings that are fully leased. We're seeing a lot more people coming back into the market. As Jonah alluded to, it's a great time to purchase. It's a great time to be in the market because of those interest rates are low and values are steadily increasing, if not at least maintaining, because everything is becoming fully leased.
And we've kind of alluded to existing commercial, John, but don't we see an awful lot of dirt being pushed around in our area?
For the first time in a long time, we're seeing a lot of dirt being moved. And we have some artificial influences in our community. We have the university that continues to grow and to influence us there. We have a wonderful new hospital that continues to influence our economy. But all of those things, yes, are bringing new commercial development to Harrisonburg.
That's awesome. Again, I want to thank you, Jonah, so much for coming. Jonah Pence with Farmers and Merchants Bank. And Jonah, how can we reach you with our commercial lending needs?
Sure. Thanks, Pam.
Absolutely.
You can reach me by phone. My direct line is 437-3461.
And a reminder again where you're located?
Located at the Crossroads branch. That's on 33 East in Cross Keys.
Great. And John, how can we get in touch with you with their commercial needs for purchasing or selling?
All right. You can give me a phone call at 271-2178, or you can visit me at johnbowman.biz, and I'd be happy to help in any way I can.
Wonderful. Thank you again for joining us. And next month, we're looking forward to another true professional to be joining us, and that's Linda Goodson. Linda Goodson is with Old Dominion Realty, and she runs our relocation director. She is our relocation director. What do I mean by that is, we have a new purchaser, let's say for John Bowman, coming in to purchase a commercial building, and he wants to move and live here as well. And so she can help with that transition of your move from wherever you may be to our local area. And so Linda Goodson will be joining us next month on October 22nd at 6:30. Again, I encourage you to email your questions for your commercial needs, and we will forward those to Jonah and John. And thank you again for joining us this evening. Good night.